Welcome back to Feeling Seen, the podcast about the movies and characters that make us feel seen. Today, my co-host is a certified ass kicker, an icon, and a personal favorite of mine. It is Rhona Mitra. Rhona stars alongside Frank Grillo and Robert Patrick in the new film Hounds of War. They're the best military mercenaries money can buy, but will they make it out of their final mission alive? I guess you'll just have to watch to find out. From Hounds of War to horses as both your management and human resources department, here is my conversation with the incomparable Rhona Mitra. Every once in a while, you guys know that I have one of those very exciting days where I have someone on the podcast who is somebody that I've been wanting to have on since I started thinking of the idea for this podcast. And this is one such actor. Her film coming out now sets her alongside Frank Grillo in Hounds of War. You might know her from a favorite property of mine, which is the Skylines franchise from writer-director Liam O'Donnell. You might know her from the television show The Last Ship. You might know her from the movie Doomsday. You might know her from so many other credits across film and television over the past so many years. Rhona Mitra, what else do the people need to know about you before we get started today?
Oh my goodness. Well, I'm really flattered. Thank you so much. I was someone's pink ticket not that long ago, and that was awkward.
I don't think that's something someone should tell you.
I know, it was bizarre. I walked into this house and they were on their honeymoon, and it was very sweet. They were adorable, and it was all really something. But anyway, I'm always a little bit bashful when I find out that anyone even realizes I'm on the planet, let alone that they think that anything I do is I don't know, worth sort of like putting on any kind of pedestal. What else did you? Oh, there's so many other things to know. I'm in the Southern Hemisphere, and we're just coming out of winter, and it's sort of quite surreal talking about a movie that I did, a couple of years ago, but I love that.
Are you still based in Uruguay, where you keep a home, or at least in the past you kept a home with animals and you care for them and you live somewhat remotely, or are you in different environments now?
No, I'm here. Yeah, I'm in the wilderness. I'm here surrounded by my creatures. And, I still now, since COVID passed and all of that sort of stuff in the pandemic, I do dot around and I go to London and Europe. And I decided to sort of re-engage with the world of film and television, but sort of on different terms. I took a bit of a step aside to realign my outlandish ducks, which were flying all over the place, and sort of wrangle them and, tame them a bit and give them a little bit of love and redirection.
In the realignment of said ducks, of the wrangling them into a row, what did you find was the criteria for you to start resoliciting work again and accepting scripts and deciding to take parts? What was like, all right, these are the terms and conditions on which I must be met now?
You know what I realized after, you will learn an awful lot about yourself when you live alone in nature for 6 years. I did 6 years completely on my own. Now I have a gentle padding, a little kind of peppering of select humans. But my conversations and my sort of oracles and my elders and my teachers became these animals, and they sort of set me on a course where they made me realize that I can't change anything on the outside. I can't change how people behave. I can't change, the things that I suppose really either rattled me or would upset me or that brushed up against me. And I think we all have that. We realize that, I think that every work environment has its foibles. And I think it's how we choose to navigate within those environments. And so it just so happened that I think it'd been a good couple of years and I got this opportunity, which was the Hounds of War. And all the elements were ticking the boxes of all the things that could, for want of a better term, but it seems to be the term du jour, they could have triggered me. A lot of the elements. And I went out and I had a chat with my horses and I was like, what the hell is this about? And they were like, it's okay, you've got this. And now they were like, this is your charge. This is to see whether or not you can take all you've learned and wrangled all those ducks and all those butterflies in your stomach and all of those things that, used to, I suppose, upset me or, set me off or make me feel uncomfortable. And, walk into an environment which I love so deeply. You know, there are so many elements. And I think that's what it gave me, was the ability to go, what do I love so much about this? And whether the movie or the TV show does this or that, I always know that for me, the stunt department, locations, it doesn't matter if it's something very pretty or not. Crew members who are always new faces from different cultures, and the experience and camaraderie between, specifically, I've always had a thing for the camaraderie between the crew and the relationships I have with them. They're like family, and I missed it, and I missed them. And so, you know, it was sort of a bit of a, it was like, it was a yes, but it was also sort of a bit of a personal test to see how if I could navigate it with a certain level of grace, which I think I did. So secretly, I kind of walked away going, phew, you know, well done.
I think that I found that as I've gotten more exposure to sets and production and producing, the more I actually learn about what it takes to make something, the more enchanted I am by everything I see. It has not done the work of like busting the myth of what I see as the complete package. It makes things more astounding to me that anything gets made at all. And I'm just sort of, it makes it difficult for me to like say an unkind word about anything, because I'm like, guys, do you know what it took to do any of this?
Yeah, I mean, there are so many moving parts, and in that way, and it's so important to look at it like it's a whole orchestra, you know. And I think that, I hope that the day of it being about sort of the most important, I mean, all of that set, you know, the hero or the movie star or the number one or the number two on the set or the biggest producer or the biggest director or the biggest highest paid actor. It's like all of that stuff kind of dissolves when you actually just realize I am one instrument in this whole symphony. And when people come at it like that, which is like, I just need to make sure that I'm playing my part right. I need to make sure that I'm contributing to this song in the best way possible. And then what happens is when you do that, for me as well, is that I pull away and I love watching. Listen, you shouldn't be able to see what's happening behind the scenes as you're watching, because if you're noticing the wigs and the costume, then
yeah, if the boom mic's in the shot, it's a 1980s movie that had $8.
Yeah, and the boom operator's trying to upstage the situation for sure.
This entire lead up, I think, is a perfect stage setting for the character in the film that you have selected. There are so many tie-ins to that. I love this choice. The I believe it was 67 adaptation of Far from the Madding Crowd, starring Julie Christie as Bathsheba, the woman who inherits a farm from a relative who can no longer maintain it, and then she is left to be the head of the household and sort of batting off the various suitors that come to her door and the various problems that a life of maintaining a large farm presents itself.
Now, I don't yet know my powers or my talents in farming, but I shall do my best. And if you serve me well, so shall I serve you. Yeah. And don't let anyone suppose that because I'm a woman, I don't understand the difference between bad goings-on and good. I shall be up before you're awake. I shall be afield before you're up, and I shall have breakfasted before you're afield. In short, I shall astonish you all.
And it feels like you kind of opted into your Julie Christie journey of maintaining a home at the edges and being entirely responsible for its outcome.
Yeah. It didn't dawn on me until I started watching the film back to back when I first acquired the land. I have 400 acres, which I took on, and it's completely wild. And it's a very male dominated culture. So I'm in Latin America, which isn't, you know, people say, okay, I'm hashtag off grid, and you find out they're in Ojai, or
they're in a yurt attached to a resort.
Yeah, hashtag forage, hashtag I harvested this today from my beautifully curated garden that I paid $100,000 for. No, so then when I love the story and I love the book. There are certain stories that you just carry in your heart and you don't really know why. And then Julie Christie was obviously, I mean, that was my sort of, when I was a kid, my mum always had those movies with Richard Harris and Julie Christie and Peter O'Toole, and so she was sort of like in my blood. And then when I saw the first one, Madding Crowd, and then the second one came out, and I'm a huge fan of Carey Mulligan. And Matthias Schoenhartz as well, who I've worked with once and is just the most beautiful human. And I like the fact that he's sort of under the radar as an actor because he's able to take on a role like Gabriel Oak, which just is the ultimate.
Miss Bathsheba Everdeen, I brought you a lamb.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Oak. He's such a dear thing.
He's come too soon and won't last the winter, so I thought you'd like to rear it instead.
Thank you, that's very kind. I'll make some tea.
The lamb is not why I came.
Go on.
Well, Miss Everdeen, I wanted to ask, would you like to marry me? I've never asked anyone before.
No. I should hope not.
Well, perhaps Perhaps I should leave.
Mr. Oak, there are things to consider.
Is someone waiting for you?
No, but that doesn't mean I'll marry you.
Good day to you, then.
And that's the other thing, is that the representation of what Gabriel Oak is to a woman who fundamentally can handle everything herself and gets on and does everything herself, or so she thinks. And I suppose there's something in the realization for all of us women who, grew up really independent, navigating our own journeys to greater or lesser degrees. I think that there is always a place for the softer side of us, that no matter how tough we are, to have a partner to hold our hands, And that's something that I had to learn and something that I had to come to. But the first thing, like wrangling wilderness and land and animals and neighbors and cultures and the masculine and going up against that. Yeah, I mean, it's been a whole other challenge. There's something about women forging their own paths and not sucking their thumbs about it and getting on with the task at hand that I find to be so much more empowering than any female empowerment movement. Is do more, say less.
Bailiff Pennyways. Here is 10 shillings and a further 10.
Why?
This ends our association. You are dismissed.
I beg pardon, miss.
When my uncle was alive, this was a fine, productive farm. Since his death, it has fallen into ruin. I can
Now,
only
see here,
assume.
miss, you can't get rid
I
of
have resolved to
people
have
like
no
that.
bailiff at all. I've decided to
You can
manage
do what
everything.
you like, but you
Mr. Pennyways,
can't
if you'll
just-
listen to me for a moment.
Well, you need
Mr.
people
Pennyways,
like
a
me.
fire threatened to destroy the barn, and you are nowhere to be found. I have no use for a man like you, Mr. Pennyways. You are dismissed.
Get on and do it. And I feel like, especially in this time, I have nieces. I don't have children of my own, but I'm very aware that the characters that I've played, as a result, I've got quite a big female following. And I think, you know what, it's great to play these characters, and it's awesome that they thought that Eden Sinclair in Doomsday was heroic and all of that, but she's not real. She's not real. And so there's always this that you're kind of presenting an intangible heroine that people go, okay, well, I can never be that because she's on screen. And so I thought, naturally in my own life, I started like forging this path and realizing that there's no award that I could ever receive that would make me feel as accomplished as being able to get through droughts and floods and all sorts of like issues, medical and otherwise, with a herd of wild horses and get nothing for it other than, in as far as like rewards that we would consider to be rewards, other than the gift of being with them. It's sort of an extraordinary place of peace that makes you sort of feel like this whole, whether or not you're a man or a woman taking on a man's job, and this whole polarization of masculine and feminine, which I'm so opposed to, so much more about adopting an attitude towards, your situation, which no one is a victim to. And that's what I love so much about Bathsheba Everdeen. She's out there. She's a free spirit. She says no to all these offers.
You shall have everything you want. No worries, no household cares, no thought of weather in the harvest. I wish I could put my feelings into more graceful shape. Miss Everdeen, if you could...
I do not love you, Mr. Boldwood. Certainly, I must say that.
And of course, she's still a woman and she succumbs to a few and she makes mistakes. But ultimately, she's this pure wild spirit that just takes on the challenges as they're thrown at her. And I love that. I love that. In the fact that it's in the 1800s as well, it means that, you know, the essence of this kind of creature has been burning for a long time. It's not something, you know, revolutionary.
Well, and I think, too, that, like, it's something I had to sort of check myself about, like, the period piece aspect of it, too, because you have, like, Bathsheba she's being courted by, initially, Gabriel Oak. Like, he wants to make her his wife. He's a neighboring sheep farmer. This is the very beginning of the movie. It's a 3-hour epic. So when we meet him proposing to her at the beginning of the movie, we're like, well, we know this can't go well because we've got 3 more hours with our friends here. And she eventually, after, like, multiple suitors come to her, who are in measures, like, practical or decent men who are at least, like, pragmatic and kind, like her good neighbor when she inherits a larger farm, she picks the worst of the 3. She picks the roguish Terrence Stamp as a young soldier. But then, like, you realize, like, when there's a scene at a grave, a woman is buried and she's aged 20 years. And then when a man is buried beside her, he's 26. And it's like, well, she is also, amidst all of this, probably 22 years old, 21 years old. So, like, in the period, like, it's like I love watching stories about teenagers and watching them make bad decisions or reckless decisions or poorly thought out ones because it feels sincere to the era of life. And you can't sit there and be like, come on, teenager, why didn't you make a better choice? So if you watch this, it's like, God, like, Bathsheba, you've got this whole farm, you've got all these people looking to you. And it's like, but you are also a 22-year-old woman having to navigate all of these responsibilities, desires, and promises to yourself that you wish not to break in the process of all of this.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, you know, what I find interesting about being 22 or 42 or upcoming, you know, I don't know, the 50s and the 60s, I think that we remain quite naive until we are completely broken. And I think that we keep on getting sent choices to mess up, so we hopefully learn. And that's what it's all about. She's obviously in the first run of her making big mistakes, as we all went through. And some of us get the memo and some of us don't get the memo. I mean, by the end of the movie, I wouldn't have got the memo. It took me until I was, 40 odd to get the memo. It really did. I was still being sent. It was like, nah, you didn't learn on that last one, so we're going to send you another one. And it's like, holy moly. Or maybe I needed to learn something very important about something else. And it's like, oh, because every human being that comes into our life, even every animal that comes into our life, everything comes in to teach us something. And so I think that we also get into this thing like, oh, what a mistake you made. What a boo-boo. Oh, God, what bad luck. And you're like, why? It's just, isn't every opportunity an opportunity? Isn't every happenstance not a coincidence? And so I think it's how you respond to a situation, whether or not you become, a victim or a victor of the opportunity. And she was a smart cookie. If I was sent I can't remember his name now, Terrence Stamp's character, Colonel, whatever his name.
Troy.
There you go. I did a few of those. I did a few.
Who are you?
Sergeant Troy.
And what are you doing here?
Before I entered the service of Her Majesty, I used to live here. I always come back for haymaking. There we are. Free. I only wish it had been the knot of knots. There's no untying.
I did a few Troys, and I can look at, and I'm like, what were you thinking? I can look back now. I'm sure you can. When you look back at little you and go, oh God. I mean, where were you at? And you realize that you were still in that sort of, I don't know, like high on a version of yourself that was running on a completely different fuel system, Because I'm like, I couldn't even imagine if that came anywhere. If a Terrence Stamp, if Troy came near me now, I've so got the number, whether it's romantic or in a work relationship or even family stuff. I'm like, oh, you're one of those.
Yeah, you've got a horse to kick him in the teeth.
Well, and I've got, I can do some of my own kicking in case you hadn't realized.
Yeah, you're a trained weapon at this point, thankfully.
Yes, I am. Actually, it's true. I've realized that. I'm like, and that's also the other thing is like I can walk in a set and I'm like, oh, I can do this. Great. And my body is still, complying and will, go with it. Thank God. And I'm sure being out on the farm every day probably helps. Even though I don't go to the gym anymore, which is kind of great.
I grew up in an agriculture town. A life on a farm is you get out there and start bucking hay and doing the accompanying work, and that's Rocky pushing a tire. That's Rocky pushing a tire.
You got it. And I actually check myself because it makes me laugh with how many like trainers I've worked with around the world, and we're focusing on this particular muscle or this particular. We're sculpting this part of my arm or this part of my back, and I'm like, I really gave a shit about that. There's a point in our lives where we really care about that stuff. And I'm like, I can't believe I used to really care about that. And now I realize I've got the wheelbarrow and it's full of the wood that I have chopped from the tree that I have harvested from my land. And I'm pushing it up the hill. I'm like, oh yeah, that's the glutes and that's the quads.
At this point, you're Rocky 4. All the bells and whistles are out the door and you're just in the woods. Now you're just in the woods.
Yeah, basically. It's sort of, if there was a camera and I really, I kick myself. But you know what? I also realize this. So when people I'm always amazed when I look online and I see people who are, living hashtag off grid or whatever it is they're doing. And they're living this so-called, so connected to nature. I'm like, who's filming all this content for you? Like, there's so much shite going on every day. I'm literally responding to, oh my God, there's a horse over there who's colicking. And, another one over there has got a bleeding foot. And like, there's like,
yeah, there's a reason a farm day starts before the sun comes up. Like, it's a long-ass day.
Dude, I mean, I was like, this winter, I was up before the sun. It was like 6 in the morning here. So actually, that's quite late. I would get up dark. I lived with a headlamp on my head. I had a headlamp mark on my head throughout the whole of winter. And then I got angry with God, whoever that is, for not designing us a light in our third eye. I was like, what? I remember being genuinely frustrated with, like, I was like, what is this design flaw? Listen, creatrix, it was such an oversight. It was such an obvious oversight because it's so great because even when you have it on in your house, you can find everything in your kitchen shelves and all of this stuff. So anyways, I was living with this thing and I realized I was clocking in. I was going out at like sort of 6, literally to rifle through horse crap. Because I'm looking for parasites, and I've become now an expert on parasites and pathologies, and blah, blah, blah. Like, it's amazing. And then I'm literally getting in at 10 o'clock at night. And the other thing is like, who has got time to, when you go to LA, and it's like all the light time in the world to be this, whole, raw, vegan, superfood, biodynamic. That I'm like, amazing. I'm so glad you've got the time. I'm like, I'm literally living off my chicken's eggs and baking my own bread. And it's like, it's old school, but you know what? I kind of friggin' love it because it's simple, it's stripped down. I know that my day is focused on actually doing something that serves something outside of myself, which is like, if I was in LA or London, I'd be focusing on going to Pilates and yoga and like, how am I going to bring anything to the table, whether it's creatively, emotionally, domestically, or spiritually, if I'm not actually putting my energy into something worthwhile rather than the size of my waist, the jungle gym situation, and then realizing that, how am I going to film this? I mean, this is an amazing moment and people would love to see it, that the horse is on death door. I've got a needle in my hand. I'm trying to find the artery so I can put the thing in and make sure that the inflammation goes down. I'm like, but who has time and who has the star?
Right.
When you're just down here on your own. So it's like, I promise you it goes on. It's just there's no documentation of it.
It's time for a break, but we will be right back with more from Rhona Mitra. Life and near-death in Los Angeles, plus an encounter with a Patagonian horse that changed her life. Then I will have one quick thing before I go about a trailer I'm super excited about for an upcoming movie called Companion. We're just going to dig into that a little bit at the very end, so stick around.
Hey, this is Mike Cablon.
Ify Wadiway.
And Sierra Kato.
the hosts of TV Chef Fantasy League,
where we are currently using fantasy sports rules to watch Great British Bake Off,
or the Great British Baking Show as it's known here in America.
We've drafted the bakers onto our teams, and now those bakers are earning us points based on how they're doing on the show.
And at the end of the season, one of us will win the prestigious TV Chef Fantasy League trophy crown. What is the...
I don't know. I keep forgetting to order something. Probably just dinner. Anyway, subscribe to TV Chef Fantasy League and play along with us at home.
Or just listen in as we cry over our bakers' soggy bottoms.
On MaximumFun.org or wherever you get your podcasts.
Hi, I'm Alexis.
And I'm Ella.
And we're the hosts of Comfort Creatures.
We could spend the next 28 seconds telling you why you should listen, but instead, here's what our listeners have said about our show, because really, they do know best. The show is filled with stories and poems and science and friendship and laughter and tears sometimes, but tears that are from your heart being so filled up with love.
A cozy show about enthusiasm for animals of all kinds, real and unreal. If you greet the dog before the person walking them, or wander around the party looking for the host's cat, this podcast is for you.
So come for the comfort and stay for Alexis's wild story about waking up to her cat giving birth on top of her. So if that sounds like your cup of tea
or coffee, Ella, we're not all Brits,
then join us
every Thursday at MaximumFun.org.
Before you had decided to hit this hard reset, did you find that in your time when you were like here in the city and you would like come from London, come to LA, was the sort of hustle and grind of it when you were in the thick of it here fulfilling in its way, or was it a sort of placeholder until you settled into this groove that you have found, which seems to feel so much more natural to you?
Oh God, no! I nearly died in LA. I lived there for 18 years. My soul was literally dead. It was done. It was gone. It was suffocating, and I managed to find a few years where I found community there. And when I was in Venice Beach, and I lived in the Santa Monica Mountains, and so I was then surrounded by coyotes and nature. But I think that what I call the careers that we do, I think are like a cartoon platform where we get to actually play out what our soul really needs to learn. And I don't want to get too spirry and weird, but I'm nearly 50, and life is about connecting to the essence of really why we're here. And if it's not, you must be quite sedated, because I think that life pushes us and forces us to get to that point where if we're not listening, stay numb and in pain and in suffering and out of alignment for all of our lives. And I felt that, in LA, and it was like, how is it that I love being on sets and I love the process of the work that I do? Because ultimately it's like an orphanage of misfits. For me, a movie set or a TV set is a bunch of dysfunctional children like me who come together and make something magical. And that feeling for me is very cathartic. And I think that a lot of people in the industry also have that connection to it. So for me, it's quite medicinal. The environment is, ironically, it's toxic, but if you can avoid that, you have an amazing time. But the problem is Hollywood itself for me was just not the place, culturally, environmentally. I think being a young woman there is quite dangerous. My identity got sort of hijacked by, at the time, people who are representing me and people who weren't guiding me. I was a kid, really, when I went there. And I was, we're all so, when we're younger in our 20s, the fact that anyone wants you to be part of anything, unless you're really cocky, is like, oh my God, oh really? Do you want me? And I didn't choose it. I just said yes. I wasn't discerning. And I realized I kept on getting typecast into playing characters, which while I love doing them, like I love playing Sonia, I love playing Eden Sinclair, I can find so much catharsis in playing those characters. But ultimately, then there's this perception that you're just this sassy badass. And it's like, that gets really, it plays into your personal relationships. It plays into how men treat you, how women treat you, how casting directors treat you. And all of a sudden, you yourself have been buried under this, caricature of yourself. And I'm like, I don't know where I've gone, and I don't know where that girl is underneath. And she was, really, really screaming out to be, to not suffocate completely. And then life events happened. I got very, very sick. And I started working with plant medicine, being diet, healing with plants and horses. So I started working with horses in a sort of, I guess, a kind of sanctuary sort of place in in the Topanga Mountains, where a woman was doing equine guided herd work. And that set me on this path, which put me down in Patagonia. I met a horse in Patagonia who gave me the download kind of mission that I was just supposed to create and open up a space where people could come and learn and heal with horses. And I honored that promise that I made to that horse. And the encounter with him was so extraordinarily profound. At that particular time in my life where I felt like my home, which was LA, the medical system, which was letting me down, the people who I realized were not really there for me in that sort of infrastructure of that world, which was Hollywood. I was sort of at this point where I was like, well, what's moving forward? And I got this sort of like nudge up my nose from this from this horse up my back. And it was like, you're going to go in this direction. And there's just lots of things that just moved me towards being here and creating this space for the horses. So ultimately, they're my boss now.
Yeah.
And I defer to them. And they've kind of put me on my track, and it's, you know what it is? It's such an amazing feeling that for the first time in my life, I actually know I am where I'm supposed to be. And when you have that, when you get back to that sort of ground zero, which is what I've been here nearly 9 years now, and I'm able to fly to London and LA and New York, and in this case for this movie, Malta, I can go into these environments and be so grateful to be there for all that it gives me in the positive, and everything else, not my frigging business. And the fact that I can be in a place where I don't have any resentment or fear or anxiety about a world that used to fill me with, dread, or am I enough? Shall I do my hair a different way? Shall I wear a different dress? Shall I have a different colored skin? Do I need to be dating? It's all of that shit. When all of that noise stops and you're like, oh, I'm 100% exactly who I need to be, and walk onto every set, into every meeting, just with that, I think everything just sort of falls into place. And that what is sent your way, your body immediately goes yes or no. You don't necessarily even have to quantify or qualify why. Your body just knows the answer. And that's an amazing place to be, because your brain is no longer in charge of the situation, which is like, don't we all want to be there?
Something that I honestly was like thinking about this while I was watching Far from the Madding Crowd, because Julie Christie, when one is a very attractive individual, they are very visible. It's a kind of form of celebrity in and of itself. So if you combine that kind of visibility with the actual heightened visibility of being famous, what visibility also equals is entitlement from other people to access you. And so what I watched in this movie was I was watching a woman who, because of her visibility of this beautiful woman, you keep having people walking up to her, straight up just proposing to her. Like, yes, it's a different time. It's the 1800s. But like, you have men walking up out of nowhere and proposing to her. You have a man who is a neighbor who everybody knows him as being married to his work. He's married to his farm. And he's like, I will rearrange my entire life and systems to be in your proximity. Please promise to marry me. And suddenly, the problem of her attractiveness becomes a problem she has to solve for other people, even though she is simply existing as she was born.
May I call on you tomorrow?
Oh, no, please. No, please. You must give me time.
Anytime. I'm happier now.
Oh, no, I beg you, really. You mustn't think... No, I must think.
Yes. And I will wait.
It feels like to escape visibility, let alone fame, but visibility at all, you went someplace where there were like literally no eyes whatsoever that could be cast upon you. And it felt just like the number of parallels watching Madding Crowd after you suggesting it as a movie that you identified with was like, damn, this feels like I don't have to stretch much to take the biographical details that I know to sort of like lace them through this movie that I've been presented with. Going as far away as you did was part of just like what is the farthest I can get from the sort of visibility matrix? What is the farthest that I can get from the value system that has been projected upon me that I have had to conform to in certain ways, where I will go somewhere where I'm almost in a blank slate of creating my own value system in a like literally, like not hashtag off-grid context, in a real off-grid context.
the sort of like the rebuffal or the wanting to shed that skin or not be connected to that was really secondary to the main drive that pushed me to move 9,000 kilometers from anyone that I know. I don't know whether or not you are familiar with anything to do with addiction, and sometimes it's the greatest lesson that you could ever learn to overcome your relationship with something that tries to possess you. But I lost my mum, but it's a rabbit hole. But anyway, as a result of it being in my family, I also had to sort of check into it and figure out my relationship with it. And you realize that actually the numbing process, the part of addiction, we all have it to varying degrees in different forms. Whether it's like, I'm going to numb through food, I'm going to numb through clothes, I'm going to numb through social media, I'm going to numb through bad relationships, whatever it is, and avoiding. But one thing the 12 Steps talks about is doing a geographic. Doing a geographic is a classic reaction it's a trauma reaction to abandonment and to betrayal. It's a massive, like, well, I'm going to the middle of nowhere. I'm going to go and live with trees, and I don't need anyone because I can do it all by myself. So, that was in there. But that was also like, listen, I mean, there's so many layers to this that I don't even know if we can get into. Like, I wasn't allowed back in the country, even though I lived in the States for 18 years, because my last name, it's sensitive time, but my last name is Hindu. But in Persian and Iran, it's a Muslim first name. I was blocked from getting back into the States, my home, my life, my jobs, my friends, my dogs, like blanket, you're not coming back in. We'll get back to you in this 8 months. I had nowhere to live. At the same time, I don't have the greatest family. They were like, that's your problem. It's not ours. So I literally, from all corners, I was being ejected from any form of a life that gave me a kind of comfort that could have been somewhat of some sort of sedative for me at a time where I was feeling quite raw. And so that was my like, well, screw it all. I'm going to bounce to, the Southern Hemisphere, and I'm going to fulfill the promise I made to that horse. And I'm going to do it with all this, piss and vinegar that I've got inside me, because that stuff is really strong fuel. And there's no way that you can survive, or I would have created what I created. I built a home in the middle of nowhere in a Spanish-speaking country with not one friend and not one ally. Well, everybody was trying to rob me. They were trying to come into my land and hunt. They were breaking my fences. They would come into my house and steal stuff while I was like out. I mean, it was like a relentless 5 years of being pushed to the test. And I don't know how I didn't go under. And so what I realized is that I actually had to go through what I call the Hall of Mirrors. And it's getting to the point where you are so stripped down to the bare bones of the absolute mess that we are. And that's the thing. It doesn't matter what the hell you look like. It doesn't matter what you do for a living. It doesn't matter what your parents did, what they told you, what they didn't tell you, the school you went to, the clothes you wear, it doesn't matter. What matters is that in your rawest, most true state, that you have the choice to wake up, show up, and be grateful for exactly everything you're being given, and then ask very politely, how would you like me to be of service? But when you're at that point and you're broken and you are cracked open, which is an amazing place for us all to be, and I think we actually all need to go through that and not avoid it. So if life puts you in a situation which is like, okay, now I get to shed the identity. Now I get to see that the girl who was running the show for the last 25 years, bless her, I love her. She can be put away in that book and be put on the shelf, and we'll take her along for the ride. But it's time to write a new chapter. And actually, the only thing that I needed to do was remember who I was. I needed to, and that's the thing, is like, our addiction to identity as a species makes us so unwell. And actually, when we spend time with animals, and we spend time especially with dogs, they remind us that our true essence is feral and pure and whole and wild and connected to everything. And the minute we start kind of realizing that, you go, oh, okay, so that life and whether I care about looking that way, it just doesn't become important anymore. And you don't think about it. It becomes so secondary, although that's the only beauty there is the true, authentic essence of any being. That's it.
To my great tragedy, I have to let you go. I have come to the end of my time with you, and I am so terribly sad about that, because I feel like I could just do this for a very long time. But I want to end by saying thank you, and I want to say thank you to the horse that you met for being your catalyst to your present moment. And I would like to send my love to the horses you keep currently for being very good bosses, because I think they're doing very good management work over there.
The HR here is amazing.
Can't beat it. Can't beat it. Rhona, thank you so much for talking to me today, for being so generous.
Oh, how lovely. Lovely meeting you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much to Rhona Mitra and all of the horses that led to her being here with me today. I am forever in your debt, you beautiful creatures. And you can watch Hounds of War wherever you like to stream whatever it is you stream. And now that one quick thing before I go, I'd never heard of this movie, took me totally off guard. Seems like one of those ones that would be like, I know Neon is making this movie and I've heard it teased for a long time, but I had not. It is called Companion, and it stars Jack Quaid, who has one of the best villain faces, like normal guy villain faces someone could have, and Sophie Thatcher. And it looks like he is keeping her prisoner in his house. It's like a gender swapped love one situation where they come together under some circumstances that seem consensual at first, before he flips a switch and we see the two of them at a table together, let's say quote unquote sharing a meal, except he has a gun at his side and she is staring at him with the fear in her eyes of a person who would be looking straight at the devil. Sophie Thatcher of Yellow Jackets fame, she does Intense really well. Can't wait to see her in The Heretic coming up, the A24 movie with Hugh Grant. Her having to hold her hand over a candle lest she suffer a more severe punishment. And then we cut to him with the gun next to him. Then we cut back to her and her entire arm is engulfed in flames and her eyes are welling up with tears. It's really exciting, guys. Coming in 2025, but I consider this Halloween season news because it is horror movie information dropping when horror fans are most primed to receive it. Well, horror fans always are. I will say when the general population is most primed to be receiving new horror news. So Companion, put that on the watch list. Look up a trailer. That looks upsetting as hell. And that's our show on that happy note. You can follow us on Instagram and Twitter at FeelingScenePod, or send us an email at feelingscene@maximumfun.org. If you want to follow me, I am Jorcru on Twitter. It's JORCRU. Our theme music is by Andrew Epen. This show is produced by Danielle Huesius. Our senior producers are Kevin Ferguson and Laura Swisher, and this is a production of Maximum Fun.
Maximum Fun,
a worker-owned network
of artist-owned shows,
supported directly by you.